I guess I'm going to call these reviews, people call these book talks or discussions. It's probably going to be more of a discussion format, so we can go with discussion. I don't really care what it's called. I'm going to talk about a book and what I thought about it and my reaction during reading the book. The book in question today, as you can probably tell from Siege and Storm over here and Six of Crows, is Ruin and Rising by Leigh Bardugo. This is the third book and therefore the conclusion to the Grisha trilogy. Siege and Storm over here is the second one. I don't own a copy of Shadow and Bone, but I'll put a picture right around here so you can see what the cover looks like. And Six of Crows is set in the Grisha world as well, so I thought it deserved a place in this video. I have not read it yet, but I will be devoting a little bit of time to talking about what I think it's going to be like and my hopes and dreams for what that book will be like. Alrighty, so my first section here is going to be kind of telling you as much as I can about the book without spoiling anything, since it is the third book in a series, and then as I took 6 pages of notes, we'll be talking about my reaction during the book and what some of my theories were and if I was right or not. And yeah, this is the first time I've done anything like this. I'm really hoping it's not the last time. In fact, one of my goals for 2016, which I'll talk about in my channel goals video, is to do more reviews. But yeah, so the summary of this book. So I'll kind of talk about, I guess, Shadow and Bone. Shadow and Bone is set, obviously, in the Grisha trilogy, and Grisha are basically magicians. There are certain classes of them. There are the Corpicalanics, or I don't really know. I'll plaster all the different classes around here so you can know what they are, because I have long since forgotten, because we're focused on one very particular sanction of Grisha, where there's really only one person who can do it, and that's our main character, Alina Starkov, I think is her last name. And basically, she, in the first book, works in the army, like everybody does, the First Army, and she's a map maker, and she has a best friend who is a soldier. His name is Mal Orstev, and he's amazing, and you come to love him. But basically, they go into the Fold, the Shadow Fold, which was created by the Black Heretic, who basically was experimenting with things and created the Fold, which is just, they call it the Unsea as well. It's this, like, mass of black clouds that kind of chops the country in half at the coastline, and it's full of these monsters called Volcra, and they eat people, and so people really don't like going into the Fold because usually you die. And they go into the Fold, and they get attacked by Volcra, and somehow Alina manages to save Mal's life when he is about to die at one of the claws of the Volcra, and basically the rest of the trilogy is the consequences of her discovering her power as what she is. I don't want to spoil that because I feel like that's a pretty big spoiler, so I won't talk about it. But that's about all I can say for non-spoilery people, so if you have not read this book, you should probably leave now unless you want to be spoiled. So, bye! Okay, this book. I completely forgot to mention that I gave it 5 stars. I loved it. I thought it was probably one of the best ones in the series. I really don't know where to start here. I feel like one of the biggest attributes and the best things about this book, even though as a reader I kind of feel like it's the worst thing, but really it's the best thing, was how much you were able to feel the struggle of Alina. She was really having a hard time, I mean, as one would in this horrible situation where you have to basically save the world, you can't marry the love of your life, you can't basically do anything because everybody thinks you're a saint, so you have to act a certain way and talk a certain way, and you have to lead all these people that you never wanted to, and you have all this power and this pressure, and oh my god, this book was so depressing, but it was so good. Let's look at my notes. So my original notes on Alina was that she was super weak and she had no powers, and at first I thought this was because of the battle at the Little Palace, which it originally was, but really it stemmed into her being stuck underground for so long, and she had no access to sunlight, which really screwed with all her powers and everything, and it was really disappointing. And oh my god, the Apparet, oh my god, I hated him so much. I actually, multiple notes in here are that he is an asshole, he's an asshole, he's an asshole, what's his angle, what, no, stop. He aggravated me so much in the beginning of this book, and actually I never came to like him. Completely hated him, thought he was a total dick throughout the entire thing. His angle was himself, whatever was gonna make him do best after all this ended, whatever made him look best, whatever made him achieve the highest unit of power that he could receive. It was just all about him, and he was always doing it for himself. It was never about Alina. Never. The whole scene in the kettle was just perfect, and it was then that I realized that there was something really supernatural about Mal with the blasting powder and the beetle so that he could track it and shoot it. It was just like, that's a thing! He's not normal! Oh my god! I knew throughout the book that was an underlying thing, like, what's going on with Mal? Is he a Grisha? Is he... what is happening? And then it wasn't until much, much later that you realize what it is, and you're like, oh my god, but I'm gonna get to that later. I wrote down some of my favorite quotes in here, so I guess I'll just say them. My favorite quote from that fight scene is from Alina, and her about to just, like, slay with sunlight, because she finally gets it, and she says to the Apprat, a man so obsessed with holy fire should pay more attention to the smoke. And I thought this was so perfect because I hadn't quite figured out why she wanted to go to the kettle all the time, or what the big significance was of, are they burning many fires today? And then she says that line and I'm like, that's so clever! Oh my god! I would never have thought of that. I guess maybe put in that situation I might have, but as a reader I was not thinking that at all, so it was really, really smart and a cool poetic line, and oh, I love that quote. By page 60, I was like, okay, so Stig and Harsha are gonna be a thing, and I feel like Harsha was definitely always more a thing than Stig was, because I never really got to understand his character. Honestly, I can't even remember what kind of Grisha he was, but Harsha with, I'm gonna say Oncat, I think it's Oncat, we're gonna call it Oncat. Harsha and his cat just, oh my god, I love them! They were so awesome! After that note that I had about Stig and Harsha, I just wrote that I'm really excited to see Nikolai again. I really loved his character. I thought he was super enjoyable, and I never felt like, a lot of times you can feel like he has so much power over Alina, like she needed to marry him, and she knew it, and he knew it, but he was never rude about it. He was always like, I'm really sorry that this has to happen, but this has to happen. And he was really understanding, and he was like, I don't expect you to ever love me, and I don't know if I love you, but this is something that this is a sacrifice that we need to make for the country that we love, and it just, I'm sorry. And he was really understanding about that, and I really loved him, and I thought he was super duper charming, and I would never have been disappointed had Alina ended up with him in the end. I would have been slightly disappointed, but not really disappointed, so I was okay with him, and he was definitely one of my favorite characters in the series. I wrote a note actually from when I was reading Siege and Storm, when I was thinking about Nikolai, because everybody was kind of talking about him in the scene, like, are we gonna go try to find him? Because they were still in the White Cathedral, but they were debating about what they were gonna do now, because now they had the ability to leave, and they were all talking about, is Nikolai dead? Are we gonna go try to find him? Because he probably isn't. He might be, but he probably isn't. And I kind of wrote down that I really liked Nikolai as Sturmhund, but I really liked him as the pirate. But the reveal was so kick-ass in Siege and Storm. That was awesome. So I understood that, and I really, really, oh, I loved him so much. Oh, my next favorite quote was from Alina talking to Mal about how he had shot the blasting powder to open up the, what do they call it, the flume of the kettle or whatever, and he was like, and she goes, if you say, because you're just that good, I'm going to take off my boot and beat you with it. And I feel like that just perfectly illustrated how Alina's character really, she was so fed up, she's trapped underground, she's sick, she just finally got to use her power for the first time in, I think it was months, and she still has that little spark of humor in her. She still has the ability to put on the good face for Mal because she loves him so much. And I just, one of my favorite notes that I ever wrote in here that I did write before I even read, before I was 100 pages in, I wrote, I hate the Darkling with a passion, but at the same time, the Darkling. Okay, let's talk about the Darkling. So he was 1,000 years old, I think we established, and we finally got his history later in the book with Baghra, who told us that she was Marzova's daughter, and so he, by extension, was his grandson, and I was just like, this makes so much sense, so much power, and so much experimentation, and it definitely clicked right into place. It was perfect, it made so much sense, it really wasn't grasping at straws there, it just kind of, it was like the final puzzle piece, we finally got it, and it was like, oh my god, everything makes sense. And so, I really enjoyed that part of the story, and the Darkling, oh. After After reading this series, I really understand why there's always that question that is like, what is the villain that you love them even though you shouldn't, and it's definitely the Darkling. He's just such a good villain, and he's so misunderstood. He really reminded me of Sebastian from the Mortal Instruments series. He's just like so alone, and he feels like he has no other option, and he really wants someone to love him and to mourn him and to, you know, to be with, and Alina was that for him, and he just really wanted her, and he wanted her for her power. Don't get me wrong, he was a horrible person, but he just wanted someone. He was so lonely that he just wanted someone to understand him, and he wanted Ravka to love him as a country, and he just didn't understand that on a people level, on a personal level. He couldn't understand what love truly was, and he couldn't understand how relationships work, and it's just really sad to analyze that part of him, and you can see Alina realizing that in this book as she says his name instead of hers when Ruby and his bodies are burned at the very end. And Alexander, A+ name right there, like, oh my god. But you can see her understanding where he's coming from, and she also understands that yes, he was a horrible person, but he was also horribly misunderstood, and really just, he was a tragic character. Definitely one of my favorite villains of all time. Of all time. Oh my god. Okay, talk about LGBT representation when it's not a big deal. Nadia and Timur were absolutely my life during this book. I love them together so much. Oh my god. And it was really subtle, and it was like a lot of times when YA authors put LGBTQ plus relationships in their books, it's a big deal. Like, dude, this is a big deal. This doesn't happen. But in this book, it was just kind of subtly like, yeah, that's a thing. They're together. And Alina was just like, yep, they're adorable. And I was like, oh my god, you're right. They are adorable, but this is amazing. And I just, I loved them, and it took me a minute to realize that Tamara was the girl of the siblings and not the guy, and when I realized, I just about flipped out. I was so excited for LGBTQ representation in fantasy. Oh my god, and it's just like, Leigh Bardugo just proved it's not a big deal. You can do it. It's fine. And everything works out, and they turn out to be like the most adorable couple in the entire series. Like, I have nothing against heterosexual relationships. I myself prefer them for myself, but it's, the scarcity of LGBTQ relationships in YA books make them probably the most adorable relationships you ever read about. Just loved the nonchalance of their relationship. I thought they were perfect together, and I can say this over and over again, but I love how it just wasn't a big deal. Okay, I loved when Nikolai saved them because it was so Nikolai. It was so him. The subtle, like, just letting them get captured and dragged back to camp, and then, oh, let me spend a couple of minutes complimenting myself before I actually, you know, defeat them. And, Nikolai just has a way with the entrances. Always a grand entrance, always a grand reveal. This was no different. I loved it. I loved them, and, I loved their base at the spinning wheel. I thought it was amazing, and the way she described it was beautiful, and oh my god, it was so cool. I mean, you have a rebel base in the top of a mountain, and what? That's so cool. Oh my god, I had so much fun, like, imagining what it would look like, and the meteor shower scene, and you're like, oh my god, it must be gorgeous, and I want to go there. And, and speaking of the mountain, Bagra's there. Yes, I loved her and Nikolai's relationship. It was, they were just, like, sarcastic, like, buddies, even though, like, they both pretended to hate each other, but you could tell she was like a grandmother to him, and it was awesome. It was so great, because you could tell they hung out more with stuff like Bagra was convinced by Nikolai she should train Alina more and everything, and you could see that they definitely hung out more than people thought, or that Alina thought, and I feel like Alina didn't pick up on that, but I super hardcore picked up on the fact that they were like biffles, and it was a thing. Oh my god. Genya and David. that scene where the king is like attacking Genya, and Genya's like, David, don't you defend me, you just like me because I'm broken and you want to fix me, and he's like, no bitch, I love you, and then he kisses her. Oh my god. You've been wanting them to be a thing for 3 books now, and then they are a thing, and David's the one that instigates it? What? Oh my god. So, my little heart, so many ships got together in this book, and it made me so happy. Oh my god. How many times can I say oh my god during this? Okay, so I theorized right before we got to the part where Baghra explained her history and how Morozova was her father, that I wrote down, is Morozova the Darkling's father, by extension Baghra's husband, and it turns out I was off by 1 generation, but I'm still pretty proud of myself for making that theory, even though it was only like a page before. I did comment that I was really conflicted about searching for the 3rd amplifier. It seemed really dangerous about how obsessed Alina had become with it, and I knew there was going to be something was going to go horribly wrong if she got to that 3rd amplifier, and several things did. At around page 80, I was saying that I think Harsha is kind of crazy and the whole OnCat thing is really weird, and then by page 290, I was like, okay, I kind of love Harsha and OnCat, and I do. They were so great. I loved both of them, even though OnCat, you know, is a cat. But their relationship and Harsha just, like, making comments to him, and definitely Harsha was a little bit off, but in an adorable way. Like, can you be adorably crazy? If you can, that's Harsha. He was definitely so many favorite characters in this book. He was one of them. It took a while for me to warm to him. We found out that Mal was the 3rd amplifier. Literally my only comment was, holy shit! Oh my god, why didn't we see this coming? And I guess I think it's been a couple of months since I read Siege and Storm. I read the whole trilogy this year, but I can't remember exactly when I read Siege and Storm, because I read it really soon after Shadow and Bone, but there's been a large break between me reading Siege and Storm and me reading Ruin and Rising, and I had completely forgotten about the part where apparently Alina kind of felt the power within Mal, but didn't really understand what it was because she thought it was coming from her. I either had completely forgotten about that or completely written it off as being her, and so when we found out he was the 3rd amplifier and she referenced that event, I was pretty confused, but at the same time it's like, holy shit, everything makes sense. And she went through and explained it like, we only found the steer or the deer after we kissed for the first time, and we only found the sea whip when we were hugging for the first time in months, and then, you know, all this stuff that had happened, and it just made so much sense. Once again, a lot of some fantasy series you read and then something happens where you're like, that really kind of discounts what just happened for the past 3 books. But in this book, everything seemed to fall easily into place. Everything made sense with what had happened previously, and even helped what happened previously make more sense, which, I mean, I guess is the goal of a final book in a trilogy, or any series. One of my favorite things about this entire book, which I commented on at around page 350, was seeing them all work together at that house where Mal was training with the Sun Soldiers, and Genya and David were making things, and Misha, oh my gosh, he's so great, but he was helping Genya, and Alina was kind of strategizing and working out the finer points of the plan, and everybody had something to do, and they were all working like a well-oiled machine, and it was amazing. I don't know why there was only like 3 pages where that happened, but when they were all in that house, definitely probably my favorite part in the entire book. I just loved seeing them all together and working well, and oh, it was so great. It was so great. I did not at all foresee the fact that the Darkling would not have the children. I definitely thought he would have brought them because he was so convincingly emotionless during the scene at the orphanage where Alina went to him, that I really thought he was going to have the children and he was going to murder them one by one in the fold by the hand of the Volcra. So when he didn't have the children, I was pretty shocked. I was also kind of relieved that he really wasn't that horrible. He did have something of a moral compass, and killing innocent students, while selfish, wasn't cool with him. I get that the main reason he didn't want to kill them was because we'd lost so many Grisha already, but I feel like a part of him didn't want to kill them because, come on, they're kids. But that whole scene was just Oh my god. And it was really, I think the least well executed thing in this book was Mal being the third amplifier, because while it made sense, and yes, it was foreshadowed, it really wasn't explained why she had to kill him to use him. Because I understand you kill the other creatures, but they're not human. They can't walk around and, like, hold your hand and just lend you power. Because, like, whenever he touched her wrist, they would, like, feel the power, and she never explained that she couldn't grasp it, or she couldn't use it, or wield it when it was within him, when he was alive. So it just, maybe I missed something, but it just really didn't make sense to me why she couldn't, like, just grab his hand and they could hold hands and the whole thing would work out. I didn't really understand why he had to die for the whole thing to work. After he did die and we saw what happened when you used the power of the third amplifier, it did make sense, but it wasn't explained beforehand, so I was really confused up until the moment where you saw all of the other people becoming sun summoners, and I was actually very, very disappointed in the fact that Alina did not have any power left. Now, I thought it was really cool, and the irony that she killed the Darkling while completely powerless is not lost on me. But I do say I was really looking forward to the badass scene where she just completely flattened him with her epic power. That would have been really satisfying. So I was really disappointed throughout the ending of the book. While I loved the ending and I understood why it had to happen, and I loved that Alina and Mal ended up together, and the fact that they opened an orphanage was incredibly amazing, and I loved how they weren't the people giving the epilogue. It wasn't from their perspective. It was all the rumors about them and what the servants said about them and just kind of their life, and explaining it like kind of like a fairy tale, really. I really, really enjoyed that style in the epilogue, and I just loved hearing, like, Alina just kind of flounced around and painted all the time, and they cried sometimes, but like an hour later they'd probably be making out by the stairs like a teenage couple. Like, that was adorable, and I really thoroughly enjoyed that, and I loved the part where the Through Gersha come in every holiday and bring tons of gifts, and you know it's David and Genya and Zoya, and oh my god. And the part where they mention where after the first holiday, Zoya gives Alina the blue kefta with the note that you'll always be one of us, and I just about cried my eyes out. It was so perfect and beautiful, and oh, I love these characters so much. I really did not expect to love this series as much as I did, as I typically don't like things that are super duper hyped because I get disappointed, but I really thoroughly enjoyed this series, and I hope you guys did as well. Theories for this one over here, Six of Crows, my hopes. I have one large hope, and that is to hear something of the Sun Summoner. I think it'd be asking way too much of Leigh Bardugo to write the original characters into this book, but since Alina was such a big figure and icon, and in her martyrdom, I can't imagine that she isn't mentioned at least once in this book as the Sun Summoner, as Sancta Alina. It'd be pretty improbable for her to write this book and not have her mentioned, even if it's set in the future or whenever. I just don't think it would happen. So I'm really hoping that happens. I really don't know anything about this book. So I know it's a heist book and that the main character is Kaz, I think, and there are 6 of them. So that's about it. I shall read it very soon to find out what all the hype is about, because everybody seems to be loving it. But my next read is going to be Fire and Flood by Victoria Scott. I am in fact probably going to start that right after I film this video, or finish filming and editing all the videos I have to film and edit, which I will talk about in a second. But I will be uploading a review for that as well. I hope to review most of the books that I read in 2016, but I will talk about that more in my 2016 resolutions video, which is one of them that I need to go film. And so I'm off to film all the things. Sorry for the change in camera angle. I had to clear some things off my camera because my card filled up from filming such a not horribly long, but a very long review, because I had lots to say about this book. But thank you guys so much for watching, and until next time, keep reading.